Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's movie vlog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. Today is going to be the first of many videos that I'm going to be pre-recording, which is why you will see over the next few days that I'll be wearing the same shirt. Everything else is just going to look mostly the same, and that is because I'm going out of town starting tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure that there were videos for the channel covering those times that I would not be available. Fortunately, that means I'm not going to be able to cover any breaking news, though I'm sure I have there's plenty of other channels. Josiah Rises, Geeks and Gamers, Ivan Ortega, Anna Star Wars Girl, Jesse Milestone, let's see, John Talks, Nerdrotic, now Kryptonian, and the entire fandom collective. You know, all of these channels that I think are really going to be able to pick up the pace while I am not here. However, what I wanted to do was still focus on a couple of things that are worth talking about that I know will be relevant up until the Wednesday or Thursday that I get back and able to make new videos. So boom, right here, I wanted to talk about this because this is something that I've mentioned in many previous videos. When you buy a movie ticket, where does that money go? I've mentioned this constantly in my box office breakdowns for the Geeks and Gamers channel about when you talk about box office revenue, when you talk about how much a movie actually makes, you need to actually understand what is going into it, what it actually all means. So for example, let's look to Alita Battle Angel, a movie that I've been have not really hidden the fact that I am pushing for this film. I want people to go see it. Go see it this weekend. If you want to have the option to pay for a ticket to go see Alita Battle Angel next weekend when Captain Marvel comes out, you need to go support it this weekend. You need to get your friends to go to support it this weekend. You need to get as many people as you can to support it this weekend, because guess what? They're only going to book it next weekend, and that's the reason why they do all this booking in the first place, is because they need to know how well a movie is doing on a particular weekend and on a particular week scale, so that way they can know, oh, that is a movie that we can have a lot of time slots for next week or not. That's why the movie schedules don't come out until around Tuesday or Wednesday. But going back to this, you see the worldwide totals are $289.17 million. And so when you look overall to what these numbers actually mean, you only usually come to around 60% of the entire box office that actually goes to any given studio. The other 40% goes to the various theater chains like the AMCs and the Regals, or sometimes also there are other situations, like for example in China, where the money might actually even go to the government directly. Every country has a little bit of a different standard. There's some people try and say, no, the 60% number is relevant only to the domestic market, and the foreign market is that 20 to 40%, so they don't get nearly as much money, which is true. In the foreign market, studios, movies do not make nearly as much for the studios as they would in the United States. However, when you take everything into account, when you take into account that when a movie opens, for example, they get around 90%, a studio gets around 90% of the ticket prices going in for that first and sometimes even second weekend, you understand that when you break that down and you break down that percentage goes down significantly the longer that a movie is actually out in theaters, combine it to all together with all these other percentages, 60% becomes the overall rule of thumb, as it says here from theweek.com. So this is not by chance or by any stretch of the imagination a shill website. This is not a website that really has any kinds of agendas. This is a website, based off a magazine that is, pretty reliable, I would say, for the most part. And this is also where I got my information from, or one of the many sources that I've used to use in my own box office breakdown movies. Whenever I get into the percentages and how much a movie actually makes overall, this is the site that I've gone to beforehand, though trust me, there are many other sites in which I've gone to previously. So let's just see again what it says here about movie studios when it comes to the tickets. The number one question that's often asked is, where do the actual ticket prices, where does the money that we receive from the ticket prices actually go? How much of it goes to the theater? How much of it goes to the studios? And they break it down in this way, and I think they do it very well. So as you see, arrangements vary, but the movie studio usually ends up with about 60% of the proceeds from American box office. Overseas, the number is usually less, anywhere from 20% to 40%, depending on the film distribution arrangements, agreements, and other costs associated with foreign distribution, not to mention piracy. That's why when you look to China, there's a 25% flat rate because of the various things that they have to pay, not only on top of the only getting 25% of the cut, they also have to pay a variety of other things, which pretty much leads to that 25% overall. That figure varies according to the usual supply and demand principles, though. An extremely hot first-run movie may start out with distribution fees up to 90%. In other words, 90% of the fees during that time are going back directly to the studio, which means only 10% going to the actual theater. As the film stays in distribution longer, the fees go down. Since demand goes down, until eventually the theater replaces it with a different film because it's no longer making money for them. In aggregate, across all films and all times, 60% is a reasonable estimate. In case you're curious, the differential in ticket percentage going to the studios is a major reason why box office totals are reported in terms of money and not in terms of tickets. Besides, the studio could care less if 20 million people pay $10 each or 10 people say 20 million each to see the film. As you can see, that is what the actual number percentage are what matters, not necessarily the number of tickets, because tickets range in the various prices that they have. Theaters receive the remaining approximately 40% that does not go back to the studios. Along with their concession stake, this goes to pay all their overhead expenses, employee salaries, rent, maintenance, gum removal expenses, etc. That may sound great, but the profit margin for the theater tends to be around 4%, and it is increasing jeopardy from alternative distribution policies or options, meaning that the Netflixes that exist in the world, the Amazon Primes that are keeping people going away from and not going to the theater. So you had on top of that the fact that you have in a situation many people not going to the theaters anymore. You have many theaters in these same deals having these same things where they don't get almost anything from that first and second weekend. Only until much later do those prices eventually go down, and they normally end up with around a 40% take. However, they're trying to use that 40% take to have upkeep, to continue to rent movies, to continue to do all these other various things that cost a lot of money. Imagine how much it costs just for the electricity bill alone in any theater, with all of those screens running at the same time constantly throughout the day. The amount of energy used for that, it's going to cost them a crap ton of money. Thousands of dollars, thousands upon thousands every single day in electricity alone. Thus, around $4 of your ticket is distributed throughout the theater expense chain and around $6 to the studio. Let's follow your $6 through the studio, keeping in mind that these costs vary greatly. Distribution. This used to be a straightforward distribution of physical movie reels to theaters and accounted for 10% of your tickets. The advent of digital distribution and other rights and fees can make today's distribution agreements considerably more complicated. For our more simplified example, let's stick with $1 for your ticket on the average. Actors for a typical film, something in the range of 5 to 8% of the ticket price ends up with the actors. Let's go with 6% or 60 cents on a $10 ticket. Most actors are paid a flat fee, but big name stars are sometimes able to negotiate a percentage of the overall gross as well. Production. All other costs except salaries and advertising expenses fall in this category, which takes about $1 to $2 of your ticket price. Let's go with $1.50. Marketing and promotion. High profile movies take massive amounts of advertising, especially suspected stinkers. Have you noticed that advertising volume is often in inverse proportion to movie quality? A reasonable typical cost in terms of ticket price would be 25% or $2.50. So as you can see there, one of the largest pieces of the pie when it comes to your individual tickets. So for anyone that's confused, this is breaking down what each individual ticket is made up of as far as percentage wise. So again, talking about the $10, you have $1 for distribution. You have around 60 cents for actors. Sometimes it can be more than that, though, if the actors have a special deal. Production is usually around $1.50, and then you have $2.50 for marketing and also promotion as well. And there are many other factors that come into it also. Further, in accounting terms of the vast majority of movies lose money because of the inflated production and advertising costs, various sources estimate that 60 to 80% of movies never actually turn a profit. And now this goes into what I've been saying for a very long time, that there are certain thresholds for any movie that they have to reach if they're going to break even. Here is why. Remember, as I've said before, you not only have the production budget, which is mentioned here, which makes up a pretty good chunk of the overall ticket, but you also have the marketing costs, which, as you can see here, make up the biggest chunk of the pie. Marketing and promotion, again, out of all of these, is 25% of the ticket price. 25% of the ticket price is made up. That's why some people might ask, why are ticket prices so high? Why do they keep on getting higher? Well, because it costs more money now to make films, to market films. More money is being spent on these things, and so therefore the ticket price is also going to continue to rise. Now, how does this go into account? How does this help to explain why this damn popcorn and why all the drinks and all these other things are so damn expensive? Well, keep this in mind. What happens when a movie first comes out? Remember, Normally, the way that it works, the original deals made with the studios is that 90% of that box office per ticket, 90% of that ticket, so let's say a ticket's $10, $9 of that ticket goes directly to the studio, while $1 of that goes to the actual theater itself. Now, that $9 to the studio obviously is broken up into whether it's covering the marketing costs, production costs, actors costs, etc. But overall, only $1 of every $10 actually goes to the studio. When you talk about how the fact that there are thousands of people coming in, when you have a first release film opening weekend, you have a crap ton of people coming in, which means that you are not getting much of anything off of that. Let's say that you have, 5,000 people show up on any given day, and let's say that the average ticket that they're paying for is around $10. So look at that 5,000 people, you're only getting $5,000 then just from those tickets alone, just from the fact that you're only making the dollar. Take that 5,000, multiply it by 9, and that is how much money in reverse they are ended up getting in, that ends up being the money that they get overall. So let's see, 5,000 people times 9. So $9, this would be $45,000. So once again, the studio gets $45,000 in this instance versus the theater, which would only have gotten around $5,000 from that. And so they're already kind of working at a loss. They're selling these tickets. People are buying these tickets. People are oftentimes saying, I don't really want to buy or pay for anything else. And so then you're left in this situation where, oh man, there's a lot that needs to be made up for here. There's a lot that we have that needs to be figured out. There are obviously ways that we need to be able to make up that money that we are not making at the box office. So what do? That's right. They go ahead and they bump up and boost up and very much overinflate the price of popcorn, drinks, etc. And the way and the reason why they do that is because that is how they offset that cost. When they only get 10% of the first and sometimes even second weekend, when it comes to Disney movies, Disney usually makes around 90% from both the first and second weekend when it comes to the differences between them and the theater. But because of that, because there's so many people coming in, and because after those first 2 weeks, less and less people are going to show up, it means that the theater essentially needs to make up for that lost revenue, because even though they will make more per ticket if the movie is out for a longer period of time, less people are going to be coming in, which means less people are going to be buying popcorn, etc. So that's the reason why you see it happen in this way. That's the reason why popcorn does indeed cost so much, why drinks cost so much, and all these other factors come into play. So hopefully this has been a nice breakdown. I've done breakdowns like this before, but I think it is still important for us to understand that, yes, do movie theater chains charge way too much for popcorn? Abso-freaking-lutely. Especially when you understand the cost. Again, being someone who's worked in the movie theater business, I know the actual cost, the net cost of any of these items of a bag of popcorn essentially would be, think of it in this way as like being pennies, pennies on the dollar for the actual bag of popcorn itself. However, we're now charging, or many people are charging like $7, $8 for that bag. That is a gigantic markup. But the reason why it's done is because they make next to nothing at ticket prices when everything's said and done. And also when you take into account that they only get 40% of the entire gross through the entire run of any film, then what you're left with in those situations is, and then also you're taking into account, okay, how much of that is going to be used to pay for, buying the marketing materials, how much of it is going to be paid for upkeep, for electricity, for the food items, etc. Again, all these things add up over time. There needs to be a way for these theaters to be able to keep themselves afloat, and not just afloat, but be able to invest. Again, the reason why many times we are overcharged for a lot of things is not just because they want to and know that they can get away with it. It's also more so to do with the fact that they know that if they don't do this, they will not be able to take extra money in and not be able to invest. You don't just invest money that you're getting back for things you're already paying for. You only invest money in which you have extra. And so you get that extra money from any movie theater by the actual concessions themselves. And again, this is something that I knew well before actually reading this article, because I worked at a theater and I had asked my general manager saying, hey, how much money do we actually make off of these tickets? And we were told, hey, only about 10% for the first, couple weeks. And when I would ever tell anybody, in the audience who would come in, all the, people coming in to see the movies, they would say, gosh, why is everything so expensive? I'd say, hey, the reason why is because, we make next to nothing at the box office. The $15 that you just spent to go see a movie in 3D, yeah, we only get, 10% of that. The rest of it goes to the studio. So the studio is making bank the first 2 weeks, which is why I've said before, the first 2 weeks mean a lot. Studios make their, well over 60% of their entire box office take within those first 2 weeks, because they're getting 90%, 80+% of all of the ticket sales, of all the box office revenue that's coming in. Over time, though, by the end of its run, that number will be roughly around 60%. And because we know that, we're able to take a movie like Alita Battle Angel and say, even though this says $289 million, we know that at least at this point, let's assume then that this number, because obviously if you were to break it down, this would not actually work out to be 60% at this point, just because this movie is still out and is still making money in China and other areas. So let's just say, though, let's assume that this movie had just finished its run and the last number it made was $289 million. You would take 60% of that number, and that is how much the studio made off of that deal. The other 40% have gone into the theaters and other countries, etc., however that worked out. So you take that into account, and then you take that number and you say, okay, how much did it cost to make the movie? If this were to end right here, you would obviously see that Alita Battle Angel would be a loss. Again, I still think that it's going to make enough to break even. It needs to make at least $430 million to break even. I think that it's on pace to do that. I cannot wait to see. I hope that it's around $350 million after this week, because if it is, it means it's going to have a much better chance of being able to go the distance and break even, and also even be profitable as well. However, taking this as it were, 60% of that, you subtract that from the production budget, but also remember, production budget is only talking about production. Again, as the, this website even breaks down, production is only one part of it. You also have, again, people, the actors taking things into account, but marketing and promotion as well are a huge part of that. The rule of thumb for that is that most of the time, when you look to the overall production budget, you take half of that, and that is how much you will spend on marketing. So again, we have 170, and so therefore around 85 million is said to have been spent on marketing. You add that to the 170, and that is how much the entire project overall cost to make. Now, as you can see, that would be well over $200 million. We know that this would be well under that number, and so therefore it would be operating at a loss, because they already invested the money, again, the production budget and the marketing budget into the film. They need to be able to make a certain number back in order to break even. The reason why you can't just have 289, but that's greater than 170, doesn't that match up, is because of that 289, the studios only have 60% of that, and that's not even taking into account the fact that you still need to add $85 million to this number, the production budget, to make up for the marketing that they spent on the movie. Needless to say, the reason why popcorn is so expensive is because the studios make these deals with the distributors like Regal, like AMC, and therefore it's hopefully helping you to better understand what this actually goes into it. Now, as you can see, the average of a movie ticket nationally at this point, this was taken in 2014, was $8.14. This has actually gone up to just around $10 a ticket. So it's very easy for you to look at that $10 number and break down, okay, this is how much the studio gets, this is how much the screen gets, but then also you have to understand that there's costs that come into both of those things. Obviously, the theater chain itself is a business. It needs to invest the money, needs to spend the money, and then of course you have the studio itself, who has already spent that money and is hoping to get a return on that investment, not just to match up and break even, but also to make a profit as well. So hopefully all of this has made sense to you guys. Again, this was all about me trying to break down how these percentages work, how these breakdowns work overall. There are some people out there that still try and say that the 60% only applies to the domestic totals, but once again, as you can see very clearly here, that yes, this also does say that 60% is the average normally from the American box office, and that 20 to 40%, again being taken by the studios, is the foreign market. However, because we also know that 90% of the fees, 90% of the money tends to go to the studios within the first couple weeks, especially when they know it's going to be a huge moneymaker. Again, Captain Marvel, again, 90% of those takes coming in opening weekend and the second weekend are going to make up for that number, going to get 90% of those totals, which is why I would recommend, if you really want to see the movie, wait after 2 weeks, because then it's going to tell them it's going to make a very clear indication to them that, oh, we do have a problem on our hands. We do maybe need to start to change things up, which is something I'm going to cover in another video, because it's something that was covered recently by someone I like to follow on news. Tim Pool, if you don't know who he is, go follow him on Twitter. He's a really cool guy. But he just broke down how Endgame itself might actually have 2 alternative cuts based on the success or the failure of the movie Captain Marvel. So hopefully this helps you to understand all of these things. But even again, with the differences between the domestic and the foreign, 60% all films of all time is the reasonable estimate, and that is why it is, again, the industry standard when it comes to us looking at any gross, any domestic gross of any film and saying, okay, this is how much the film actually made for the studio, this is how much the studio actually spent on it, production-wise, marketing-wise, and then we can know plus, minus, how much did it make, how much did it actually lose in the process. So hopefully all this makes a little bit more sense. I know that it gets a little wonky. I know that it gets a little bit crazy. End of the day, movies make a crap ton of money. There is an interesting split that happens between these two entities, and also we need to understand and realize that when it comes to movies like, for example, Captain Marvel, it is going to be very interesting for us to see how much it makes that opening weekend, knowing that Disney will indeed create and make 90% off of that. If that number goes in much lower than expected, if the first 2 weeks perform much lower than expected, guess what? That means they've made 90% of a much smaller pie, and that is going to affect their overall numbers, especially since now that it's past week 2 in this situation, the week 3s, the week 4s, the week 5s, they will get less from those ticket sales, more going to the theater chains themselves because of the contracts and deals that they've made. That is how you hurt Disney. You can still support this movie. Again, if you want to support this movie, but you do still at the same time, if you want to see this movie rather and pay to see this movie legally because that's the kind of person you are, again, kudos to you. But what I would say is wait until week 3, week 4, because then your ticket, your $10 that you've just spent on the movie, you know at that point that most of that is going to be going to the theater and not going to the actual studios themselves. So a way you can actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But guys, let me know your thoughts about all of this in comments below. If you like this video, smash that thumbs up button. Give me a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You are all amazing and beautiful people. And again, guys, let me know if you want to hear more about this inside industry stuff. I had a couple people saying, yes, we want more about what happened, what goes on behind the scenes. Again, as someone who worked at a movie theater, who worked within the scheduling, who worked within all these different areas, I would love to to share more things about that. But at the end of the day, I do know also that it's not something that's likely going to get picked up by the YouTube algorithm. And unfortunately, that's the battle that I have to battle every single day. But anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching this video. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. And again, you're going to see me dressed in the same clothing for a bit, only because of the fact that I'm trying to pre-record some videos. That way the content can still be put out there on things that I think need to be covered and talked about. And don't worry, we're going to get there. We're going to do everything that we can to try and cover all the things. I'm going to be maybe very, very, very lightly active on Twitter on my vacation. I'm not going to be using it a whole lot. I can tell you that for a fact. It might be something that I check, maybe a couple times a day at most. So please, if you have questions, just email me, send me a direct message, whatever it is, or hold them until after I get back. But needless to say, also, we will not have live streams during that time period. So no Monday or Tuesday live stream this week. I may try and make up a makeup live stream, maybe Wednesday or Thursday, depending. Obviously, Thursday is going to be an interesting one because my plan at this point is indeed to buy a ticket to Alita Battle Angel, which hopefully we get, that movie is at a good time slot so that I can do that to see Captain Marvel, film it, film the experience, do some vlogging to show everyone how many people are actually showing up to the theater, what the atmosphere is like, but also to how many people might be going to see Alita at the same time. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for it. But guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.